Uh, Hello, hi everyone. So the focus of this week's reading is basically on the status of African area research in African studies across a wide range of academic and disciplines, more so specifically on the humanities and social science. So the more specifically on the reading Africa and the disciplines is based is the way the author is approaching the topic of how uh, African studies is perceived and how they're marginalized, the marginalization of Africanists within universities in the United States. So overall, as a discipline, African studies is pushed to the bottom of the hierarchy. So, really going on the perception of African studies in academia. Uh, we need to evaluate the way in which knowledge is gathered on Africa and how that has shaped the development of the respective disciplines. So, if we go back to colonization to and everything, where Africa was deemed as the black continent, and with this is the shift of the relevance of Africa when it comes to anything academia, research, political, any significance has been disregarded. So the disregard of African countries' contribution to the modern world, basically beyond colonization, slavery, and any involvement of Europeans in Africa. So there's nothing relevant when it comes the perception of that there's nothing relevant from Africa if without European influence. So really has me thinking of who controls the narrative, um, when history is being told. So it's really it is the production of knowledge as it relates to the structure of power. So the power, who has the power, and what we're learning and what's being researched and what's being the focus. So as countries are considered part of the West, so the Western countries have controlled the world stage as the lead in influence, wealth, culture, and enlightenment. So it really has narrowed down the frame of thought of what is Western is what is universal. So that Eurocentric perception of history. But now, as the more and more are studying in other areas and other subject areas, we have to see that the breaking down of these false assumptions of cultural superiority within academia. So for me personally, when I realized the story that is being told to me or written is from this dominant Western point of view, I start to pinpoint areas where you see clearly the erasure of African contribution or African countries from the world's history. So in other words, when we hear whitewashing of history or Europeanizing history, so as people of African descent, for me, it was as a destruction of the African consciousness and wherever significant have been contributed or out of Africa. So, uh, another source is a complete liberation that cannot be achieved if we're still using that narrative of a more Western or European centric narrative to educate the new generation of African and African descent students. So really getting to know more about the scientific and technological or any type of advancements in Africa. So looking into African studies is contrary to some account and a separate way, and looking into higher education. is really breaking down the intellectual borders that touch on whether economics, literature, history, philosophy, and art. Is the looking at the history of the world through a different lens. It really, for me, even taking this class is opening my eyes to different, and that's why I decided to take this class to really break down some of these misconstrued um, ways of history. Is really to provide an important perspective on the evolution of African studies and offer insight on what Africa can mean for the different disciplines, whether from humanities to social science to even science, um, and everything. So it really comes to thinking about it, and when universities are thinking of what to offer students, is why should Africa be studied in American universities? Why African studies or African diaspora studies should be a focus. And it goes back to, why did you decide to take this class? Because universities cater to their students. So that's what I have to say. Sorry it's long. Um, Bye.